Thanks very much, everybody, for being here, and I certainly appreciate our dean stopping by. He has to leave. Literally, his car is waiting outside. So I said, Jack, thanks so much for coming. And this is something that we all appreciate you coming. And this is something we started about 3 years ago. And when I went to Jack, I said, you know, we're one of those top-notch public policy schools. Main Street needs us. And we can bring Main Street to us for our scholars to benefit from the potential of our school. And Jack was one of the first supporters of this. I'm eternally grateful for what we are able to do. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce the dean of our school, Dr. Jack Knott.
You know, I'm really pleased that you're participating in this Executive Education Forum. Frank tells me that we've had now about 150 people participate in this forum, city council members, mayors. We've had some board members from special districts, executive staff, all participating in this forum. So I'm really pleased that you're part of that group. The forum, as you know, is managed by the Bedrosian Center on Governance. And this is a really important central research center within the Price School. It has a mission of helping to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the implementation of public policy, as well as increasing the capacity of professionals and organizations in the public and nonprofit sectors. And so this fits very nicely with that mission, both of the school and of the center. What we're trying to do is really bring together some of our best faculty and best scholars to the community of practice, make that connection. And so, as you know, in this particular forum, we have 5 or 6 of our top faculty participating, working with you throughout today and tomorrow. But of course, this is a two-way street. You all have incredible experience, knowledge, and expertise that you can also share with our faculty. And as a professional school, it's very important for us to stay grounded in the profession, in the community of practice. And so this is just as valuable for us as we hope it is for you. In addition, from my experience with these kinds of programs, you almost learn as much from each other as you do from the faculty because you get to come together in ways that you don't do in your everyday work. You meet people who are doing similar things and you learn from each other. And so I really hope, and I'm assuming the program has built that in as well, so that you will have a chance to interact and learn from each other also, because I think that's essential. What you may not know is this program is also international. We participate in the United Nations Capacity Building Network, and I think this summer Frank is going to be going to at least 3 different places. I know he's going to South Africa and Armenia and maybe Georgia to provide this program there. Our school actually has a long history of executive education internationally. We were global before it was popular to be global. We've trained officials around the world in the Middle East, from Jordan to Thailand. And indeed, when President Sample used to visit, he'd always run into and visit with senior political leaders, and they'd always tell him about the Trojans. And it turns out the Trojans were part of the Price School's executive education program. I see we have the director of our International Public Policy and Management program here, Joyce Mann. That program also has provided that we have a great relationship with Shenzhen, China. We provide executive education programs there, in Indonesia, Taiwan, and elsewhere. So this is part of a global effort that we have. In addition, I just wanted to say a couple words about our school. You know, we work on issues of ethics, we work on issues of public policy, public administration, governance, and these are all areas of expertise within our school. We're ranked number 6th in the country nationally by U.S. News, and we have several of our programs ranked in this same way, including health policy and management, social policy, city management, public administration, social policy, and so on. We're also one of the oldest and largest public policy schools in the country. We were founded in 1928-29. And this is what's interesting about that is we were founded by people from the community and from local government coming to the then president of USC and saying, we need professional training in local government. We need professional training in urban planning and city management and budgeting and so on. And it was that demand from the community that created our school back then. So our first classes were delivered downtown in City Hall. That's where we started with our first classes. And we started out doing executive education classes for certificates, and then eventually we started offering the Master of Public Administration. And we were the very first school in the country to offer the Master of Public Administration, followed by what is now the Maxwell School at Syracuse, and then what is now the Kennedy School at Harvard. We were the first 3. Today, we have about 1,800 students, with around 600 of those undergraduate students and about 1,200 graduate students. We offer 2 undergraduate majors, one in real estate development, the other in public policy and planning. We offer 5 regular master's degrees in real estate development, urban planning, public policy, public administration, and health administration. And in addition, we offer 4 executive master's degrees, if I can get them right. We have the Executive Master of Leadership. We have the Executive Master of Health Administration. We have our new Executive Master of Nonprofit Leadership and Management in our International Public Policy and Management program. So we've expanded and grown in a variety of ways. We're one of the prominent schools, though, that even though we do a lot of international work, a lot of studies of national policy, et cetera, we've kept our feet grounded in the community. Our real strength is urban, it's local, it's city government, city management, urban planning. That characterizes our school more than anything else, and more than most other public policy schools. So this relationship that you are forming with us is in our DNA. It's the kind of thing we did from the very beginning. It's essential to who we are as a public policy professional school. We're not just an academic department. We're really trying to connect to the community of practice. We're training people to be in your roles in the future. So having that intergenerational and professional part of the school is essential for us. So I hope you really enjoy and learn from this program. Frank's been a great leader of it, and he acts as a perfect bridge between that community practice. He's a full-time professor in the school, but he's also a 2-term mayor and a city council member and Rolling Hills Estates. So he's got a leg in both worlds, and so we're really proud to have him direct this program. Please interact with each other, learn as much as you can in these 2 days, stay connected to us, get to know some of our students going forward, and thank you for participating. Thank you very much.
We have amassed, certainly in our judgment, an amazing team of panel members for us today. And we are delighted, of course, that both the Sheriff Department, as well as Edison, as well as Best and Krieger, and of course our own University of Southern California, would lend their experts to us to come and speak at this wonderful group of people. I also want to recognize, at the expense of leaving people out, people who have joined us after the fact. And I certainly have my very good friend Ara Najarian from the City Council of Glendale and on the board of Metro. Susan Moulton from Waste Management. Chief from City of Palos Verdes Estates, Police Chief of the Palos Verdes Estates. Let's see, who else joined us that afterwards that I'm missing? Pam O'Connor came from council member from City of Santa Monica. Charlie Wilson in the back from Edison, a small company known as Edison. But we're delighted to have Charlie, and Charlie and Zanku have been terrific supporters of all of this, and we owe to Charlie's ingenuity to be able to get not only be able to support the program as the Edison does among waste management and others do, but Charlie's ability to convince the League of Cities to make sure that the caucuses participate, and we are delighted to have representatives of the African American caucus, the LGBT caucus, the Latino caucus, as well as the API caucus represented in this classroom today. So, which is very, very good and excellent, and thank you, Charlie, for having done that, pushed that through, because we really care about education, and we want to be as diverse as we can in our communities, and so that's really, really very much thankful for that. So what I'm going to do is I am going to ask our panelists to come up. Their bios, I'm not going to introduce them one by one. Their bios are with you, and they'll say something about themselves very quickly and get right into their presentations. So we're going to start with Tamara first, who's from Best and Krieger.
Well, good afternoon. It's my pleasure to be here today. I have been practicing law for approximately 16 years. I want to thank Frank and his staff and the USC Price School for inviting me here today. I also want to acknowledge our firm's law enforcement specialist, Mr. Paul Capitelli, who's here. He was the former executive director of the Peace Officer Standard and Training, and he and I work very closely together in providing support and services to our police department clients. I primarily am in the Municipal Law Public Safety Division of our firm, and I provide legal advice, support, and representation to our police department clients, assisting them with such things as Public Records Act requests, subpoena responses, representation in court on excessive force matters, many, many different types of cases, assault, battery by officers, allegations of inappropriate conduct by officers. And so I think that this is a very cutting edge, very important topic to talk about. So let's get started. BWCs, LPRs, Google Glasses, biometrics, all of these acronyms, all of these phrases, 5, 10 years before today, we would not have known what they meant. But now policing is in every aspect of our world. We are inundated in the news, in the media, by a policing event, an activity, a video footage, something that has occurred with our local police departments throughout the nation. So what we're going to be covering today is sort of the legal aspects and what have courts said about this particular type of policing technology. And I would like to start briefly with this important point. On December 18, 2014, President Obama signed an executive order establishing the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. So clearly, even our president thinks that this is a very important matter that our elected officials and our police departments should take seriously. What the preface of that paper that was prepared by the task force said is that trust is essential between law enforcement and citizens in the community to democracy. So what are our local legislators going to do, and what are our courts going to do in order to balance the privacy interests of the public and the legitimate law enforcement purposes and interests in order to apprehend and prosecute criminals? These particular uses of technology assist law enforcement. We have heard more than we probably want to about body-worn cameras, dash cam videos, drones, smartphones, license plate readers, handheld radar devices, but what do they all revolve around? The advent and the integration of technology through the use of the internet. So let's talk about the different types of technology. I've just placed images here so that you can see what our local law enforcement officials are doing in the field and what types of technology they're using. Now that item in the corner, the green ball that looks sort of like a monster's eyeball, is called a bounce cam. And what that is a camera that's inside of a ball. Of course, it's much more technologically advanced than the way that I just described it. But it provides officers the ability to bounce that ball into a room and obtain multiple images that are captured by that camera and then can be transmitted simultaneously onto an officer's smartphone. So we're going to talk about the technology that officers use and how ultimately the information, the footage from that technology can end up on the internet. So the question is just because law enforcement departments have access to or resources to technology, should they use it? The world of policing is changing, and the law must respond. There are barely any court cases on the subject of these particular types of technology. Dash cams have been around, and 911 recordings have been around. And so what the courts are going to do is they're going to focus on 3 words. They're going to focus on expectation of privacy. And so what I've done here is I've provided you sort of a snippet of what each side is going to argue. Balancing the public's right versus an officer's objectives utilizing this technology. The public obviously is going to always raise the flag of privacy. Understandable. You and I, if we are a bystander walking along a street and an officer has a body-worn camera and it captures our image on that footage and that ultimately makes it to the internet, we're going to protest. We're going to say our privacy rights were violated. So what I've done is I've separated the different rights and interests and objectives between in the field, access, release, and discovery through use of the Public Records Act request. We're all familiar with that. That's been around a long time. And then, interestingly enough, what we've seen with the public is if they're not the subject of an investigation, they will use a Public Records Act request to request information from local agencies, municipal bodies. But then when they end up as the subject of an investigation or facing criminal charges, they're going to assert their Fourth Amendment rights. On the other side of the spectrum are the officer's objectives. They want to capture the event from the officer's perspective. They want to utilize the investigatory record exemption under the Public Records Act to prevent and resist disclosure of footage or information accessed from technology. And then in court, they're going to say that they were conducting this investigation in their official duties and that the warrant exception would apply. So there are 3 pillars that we need to consider when we are enacting legislation or we're arguing these cases before the court: transparency, accountability, and privacy. So let's talk a little bit about what the courts have done so far that we are aware of, where there are actual court rulings on the use of technology in cases. Handheld radar devices. If you recall, in the previous slide, I had a photograph of it. That little item there. We all know radar devices from when I get a ticket. That radar device can be used to place it against a wall of a home and to get infrared information about where the suspect is located, heat sensing location, so it assists officers in the field. Courts have said you need a warrant. Okay? Body-worn cameras. There is no case that's made it through the appellate court or the Supreme Court about the use of footage from body-worn cameras. We do have cases about dash cam videos, and the courts are going to use that information from those cases to analyze footage from dash cam videos. But there are 2 exceptions to the use of body-worn cameras in the field by officers. The first is that under Penal Code Section 632, while I can't record our conversation without your consent. California is a two-party consent. Penal Code Section 633 exempts law enforcement officials. Basically, if they're in a location where they can record a communication that they could lawfully overhear. The other exemption is that it's a visual image. The body-worn camera is capturing a visual image, and so it's not content-based. The conduct is coincidental to the communication. So we believe that as these cases make it through the courts, of course we can never predict exactly how appellate courts and the Supreme Court's going to rule on the use of footage from body-worn cameras. We believe that that's what the court's going to start their analysis at, is the exemptions under the Penal Code and the law enforcement exception. Cell phones, and I'll come back to the two middle points that I have there. Two brand new cases that came down from the Supreme Court, and if you go onto our website of our firm, we have a portal called BBK Knowledge, and I've written articles about those cases. You can get free BBK alerts that provide you with brand new cases that have come down from the appellate and Supreme Courts on all kinds of matters involving public municipalities, but specifically the ones that I've written have to do with law enforcement. And the two Supreme Court cases that I briefed that are available for you on our website have to do with cell phones. It's the Riley case and the Wyrie case. They rhyme. Basically, I won't bore you with the details, but both cases, officers searched the digital contents of the suspect's cell phones without a warrant. And basically, in a nutshell, to summarize what one Supreme Court justice said, I believe in the Riley case, get a warrant. So in order to search the digital contents of cell phones, officers have to get a warrant. It's no longer a search incident to an arrest. Just because the suspect has their cell phone attached to their belt, in their hand, in their purse, does not make it a search incident to an arrest. License plate readers. Our firm represented an agency in South San Diego County that got a Public Records Act request for all information that was taken from the license plate reader. Now, license plate readers are basically, it's a way to capture the license plate of vehicles that are traveling through the area where that license plate reader is located, and it processes information for officers so officers can have real-time information as to whether or not the vehicle is stolen or any other information regarding the internet. Lastly, new case that came down about GPS, global positioning systems. Whether or not officers need a warrant to attach it to a car. Again, court said yes. This constitutes a search. Therefore, you need a warrant. So what we're seeing from the Supreme Court is that if the item is attached to the person, if the item is something like a cell phone or a GPS or a handheld radar device where we have an expectation of privacy, those are the three buzzwords I talked about, then the courts are going to say you need a warrant. However, there are some exceptions, and what the courts have held is that if you're in the back of a police car, if you're interacting with the police, if you're in the jail, even if there's a hidden recording in a police car, don't need a warrant. There's no expectation of privacy in those locations. And body-worn cameras of officers who have those coming into a residence, can they record without a warrant? Well, what we know is we have case law that says if the officer is lawfully in your residence, investigating, somebody called, 911 hang up, whatever the case may be, if they're there for that reason, without a search warrant, exigent circumstances or hot pursuit where they're attempting to apprehend a fleeing felon, then those are exceptions to the warrant requirement. So what I did here in a nutshell is summarize what the cases have held regarding technology that we're aware of thus far. This area is expanding, and there's going to be case law that's going to just blow up in this area. And so as the new technology comes through the systems and people appeal their cases and it goes up to the appellate courts, we're going to see more and more case law on this subject matter. So the release of police footage. As you may have read in the LA Times, the Los Angeles Police Department has already rolled out officers wearing body-worn cameras. And what Chief Beck is on record saying is that he will not release the footage from body-worn cameras unless it's a court order either in a civil case or a criminal case. And what he's relying upon, based on, I'm sure, what his city attorney has told him, is that that is an investigative record. The investigation is still pending. Therefore, a release of it would compromise the investigation, compromise police practices. And so he's already, one of the largest police departments in our nation has already taken a stand and said we're not going to. There are departments throughout our nation are doing the opposite. They're releasing everything. So as we in our municipal governance make decisions, it's going to affect the release of police video footage. How? When we craft our Public Records Act exemptions, when we craft our policies in our cities, what are we going to release? What are we not going to release? And what exemptions under the government code can we rely upon to withhold disclosure of this information? But there are several bills coming through legislatures throughout our nation, and I didn't articulate each one because of my limited time, but they are essentially designed to prevent public disclosure of videos taken by police officer cameras. And of course, what does this do? It sparks debate. There are the privacy proponents. You've got the ACLU chiming in. They prepared a white paper outlining what they believe should be disclosed, what should not be disclosed. You've got the law enforcement officials not wanting to disclose. You've got the people who want transparency and accountability in the police departments because of all the multitude of police shootings that have been going on in our nation. So there's a lot of debate in this area. But there are a lot of questions too. Should we release video footage of an officer interacting with a minor under the age of 14? Should we release video footage of an officer on the scene of a medical emergency? Should we release video footage of an officer who's investigating a crime that occurred at a healthcare facility or a mental health care facility? Because that basically brings in all kinds of other protections under HIPAA and child privacy rights and juvenile records release. There are so many bubbles that are going to come up to the surface. We have to stay ahead of it. And the way that we do it is we craft policies and we follow the government code exemptions and we determine what's best in our particular locality. We've heard a lot about drones. Well, one thing that you can be rest assured of is that as of right now, there is no reasonable expectation of privacy in the use of drones, because what we know is that it does not attach, what I said earlier, to a person or your property, such as your belt or your purse. All it is it's what can be accessible to the public eye. And so we see that the courts are going to look at one particular question when it comes to drones and the law. Does a person have a reasonable expectation of privacy in their location data, in your coordinates, where you're standing, where your home is? Do you have an expectation of privacy in that data? Not the actual home. We all know we have an expectation of privacy in our home, but in the data. If so, certain types of drone surveillance will be determined to be unconstitutional and an unreasonable search. So with the advent of the internet, I wanted to talk a little bit about what officers are using the internet for. They're using the internet to obtain information about suspects, witnesses, victims. They're using it to provide them a glimpse of information that they can get without a warrant, without a subpoena. But what we've seen in these cases, Facebook postings, YouTube videos, information from Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, is how do we get this evidence admitted into court? There's authenticity problems, there's preservation problems, collection problems, and storage problems. So while the internet is being used by officers to help them in their investigations and detections of criminals and cyber, which we'll be talking about, cyber crimes, it's very problematic to get that evidence admitted into court. On the flip side of the coin, the internet is also being used as a venue for crime, and law enforcement agencies throughout our nation are trying to figure out how to get a handle on it. And you're going to hear a lot more from our other panelists. But the main thing I want to focus on this slide is that The laws designed to criminalize cyberbullying have been found to violate the First Amendment. So there are case law on this about individuals posting items on the internet and the court saying they have utilized their First Amendment right. And again, as I said with the previous slide, the evidentiary issues, how do you prove these cases? How do prosecutors win these cases against these internet criminals, as I call them? There's anonymity problems, identity problems, preservation of evidence, chain of custody. These are all things that the attorneys have to deal with. But for the most part, there are so many different types of crimes and so many different types of evidence that have to be admitted in those cases in order to win a prosecution, that the collection and storage and custody of that evidence and that information is critical. So that's pretty much my presentation. If there's any questions at the end, I will be happy to answer them. The most important thing I would say, especially with the body-worn cameras, is policies, policies, policies. Policies on training, policies on release, policies on storage, uploading it to iCloud, security so that those videos don't get posted on YouTube the following day. We are working with our law enforcement cities, our clients, to draft policies on how to deal with those. So thank you again for the opportunity. It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Tamara.
Good morning. I'm Mike Orosz, and I'm a computer scientist, a director of research, and a professor in the Civil Environmental Engineering department here at USC. But my main home is ISI, that's the Information Sciences Institute. It's not the Pakistani organization. But and we're located in Marina Del Rey and also in Arlington, Virginia. And so most people don't know USC is in Arlington, Virginia. And so I'm going to talk about cybersecurity. So let's make sure we got this right. Good. So first, just really quick, what are some of the exploits that are out there? I'm not going to go through every one of these, just a handful of them, but just to sort of set the stage of what we're trying to prevent or reduce. Denial of service or distributed denial of service. What is that? That's where you have like a website where it's attacked by one or more systems out there, and they overwhelm that site to the point where it just can't function. So you hear about this with banks. They get a DDoS attack, and no one can get in and access their account. That's what happens. And botnets, you've heard of botnets. What happens is various programs are distributed around the world, millions of computers, and they wake up at some time and they all attack a single site. Very difficult to prevent that unless you have multiple sites, and that's stuff that we're looking at resolving. Phishing, you've heard of this. Email is a traditional way of doing it. You get an email, look, we're changing your account, give us your all your sensitive information. Spear phishing is just is phishing, but it's directed right at you. It knows you. Dear Dr. Orosz, we need to change your password. Please give us your current password. I'll jump down. Physical, I'll go clear down the bottom, because you may think, what's physical? Why am I worried about physical attacks to my cyber network? Well, in a big city, it's probably not a big issue, but in rural communities where your whole infrastructure, EMS, and everything else is reliant on the internet, and it's riding on a cable backbone, all you have to do is go up a utility pole. It's 16 feet, cut the cable, you're done. You're done, all right? So physical attacks. And an insider threat, which is probably the hardest thing to deal with because it's an employee, it's a trusted individual. And what are they doing? Usually they attack, they're disgruntled, they've been fired or they're leaving, they didn't get the promotion. Really hard to prevent that, but something that we've got to address. So recent headlines, I think everybody's seen a lot of this. So cybersecurity is really about balance. We're balancing its costs, right? How much are we willing to spend to protect our networks versus how much can we afford in an attack? And an attack is monetary costs, of course, psychological, my email account's been hacked, loss of opportunity. On the other side of it, preventing an attack costs an enormous amount of money. You have to constantly update firewalls, train personnel, etc. Degradation of performance. Every firewall you put up, every password control you put in just slows down productivity. And then finally, intrusion. We just talked about earlier how the police are monitoring. Well, it's the same thing. keystrokes are being monitored, etc. People, they like to think they have a little bit of freedom and security and privacy when they're on the internet. Well, the more you secure it, the less that is. There you go. So cybersecurity is not just a technical problem, it's a social technical problem. Okay? A lot of people, a lot of researchers, a lot of companies spend a lot of time working on the technical side. Again, new firewalls, new antivirus software. But really, the weak link in most attacks is the social side. It's us. We share passwords. We use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Okay? Or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's the weakest link. And we really need to focus on that. We have to focus on the technical, but we've got to focus on the social side of it. It's a combination of the two, all right? And so, why is the weakest link? In many cases, we are confused or it's overwhelming, especially with the Internet of Things coming. Everything's going to be connected. I mean, your clothes are going to be connected, all right? So how do you protect all this and track all these passwords? And so it's very overwhelming. It really is. Bounded rationality, we're very limited to, we do irrational decision making, and I'll get into that in a minute. We use heuristics as a mental way to do shortcuts. And a good example of that is this. We don't understand. I have nothing to lose or hide, so why should I worry about it? Okay? I can easily recover from a cyber attack. We're a small company. No one cares about us, all right? I'm not connected to the digital world. Well, I hear this all the time, Port Savelli and Long Beach. What happens is we look for information that confirms this belief. We're too small. No one's going to bother me. They're going to bother the bank. No, they're going to bother everybody. We're all in this together. We really are. Okay, so what are the motivations of our cyber community? Well, attackers, I spent a lot of time with the FBI, Department of Defense, and others interviewing hackers. And to find out what drives them. And obviously greed is a big part of it for a lot of them. Power, access, the thrill of it. And what's not up here is that it's a very competitive world in the hacker community. If you go into the deep web, which is not, you can't Google this, but if you use different tools to get in the deep web, you can go to hacker sites. And these guys brag all the time about how they've exploited systems. And so it's a game. It's just growing up game, but it's a serious game. And the rest of us, well, we get complacent. We don't understand. We're too busy. We're overwhelmed. We take shortcuts. And so we're spending a lot of time trying to figure out how can we handle, we're not going to change people, but if we can understand people better, can we come up with different technologies to address that? Okay, so mitigation strategy. We can develop and implement policies. We just talked about that. But in order to implement policies, you really have to understand what are the cyber risks. And so it really comes down to risk assessment. Okay, and that's something this school does. All right. Risk assessment needs to convince or persuade stakeholders to take action. That's not just government officials, it's all of us. And to do that, you need to demonstrate what are the threats, the vulnerabilities, and the consequences of an attack. That's what the Port Savelli and Long Beach need. They want to see a tool that tells them how vulnerable they are and what happens if they don't take the necessary steps. And that comes down again to assessing risk. And I put up here CREATE, that's the Center for Risk and Economic Analysis of Terrorism Events. That's a Department of Homeland Security counterterrorism center here at USC. Part of it is under the management of the Price School, and the other part is under the management of the Viterbi School of Engineering. And that's what we do. We calculate and assess risk and advise. Right. So just briefly, to close out, some of the stuff we're doing here at USC, just to give you an idea, some of the technologies we're looking at, and then I'll close it up. We have the Deter project. This is a test bed at ISI that allows us to simulate with great accuracy the internet. It's not the whole internet, but it's a large portion of the internet. And so we can introduce worms and viruses and firewall technologies and attack it and try to prove what works and what doesn't. Okay? We have a degree program, 2 degree programs. I'm not going to go into details, but we can talk afterwards if you like. But we actually focus on training the next generation cyber warriors to protect our society, our nation. Okay? I'm involved in a National Science Foundation project where we're looking at the social side of the technology. We're looking at the motivations of the attackers, the defenders, and us, the end users, and can we model that? And then use game theory to understand the interactions between those characters, those actors. And if we can understand that, maybe we can use that information to help us with the technological side of cybersecurity. And then finally, we're doing some work with power grids, but with the Department of Water and Power here in LA, not SCE, sorry, those out there. This is smart grid cybersecurity, and basically this is basically a very simplified view of the cyber network. The customer's on the right, and they communicate with the utility on the left. And there are many places where you can attack such a network. Okay? One of the X's are communication pathways. But what we're currently focused on is really where the brains are in smart grid technology. You know, that's where all the microprocessors are used to make decisions about switch gears and et cetera, et cetera. And we want to protect that. So we take an onion defense. Want to wake up? There you go. Just like in physical security, where you have layers of defense, we do the same thing in the cyber world. Okay? And so we put a firewall around the critical components. We put resources out there. We call them sentinels. And they're smart. They look for abnormal behavior, things out of the ordinary. And if they find something that's out of the ordinary, they can actually take some actions. A little slow here. Based on policies. We're back to policies again. Policies drive a lot of what we do, right? Now, if those guys outside the firewall, you know, that's just one set. That's one layer. We have on the firewall sentinels, and they do the same thing. Abnormal behavior, they detect it, they take action. And then we have an inside, where there are sentinels inside the smart grid technology looking for insider threats, viruses, worms, and they can take action. And then if all those guys fail or they're overwhelmed, we have basically an oracle that sort of is an umbrella that can take action, all right? And so we've tested this on our deter test bed, and we're now in the process of integrating this into Department of Water and Power. They have a 52,000 customer test bed, real customers, and we're going to be introducing and using this technology to help protect that grid. So, steps for you possibly to think about to mitigate an attack. Recognize that we're all in this. It's all of our responsibilities. Strengthen authentication protocols. You know, you change passwords often. You might want to use a 2-step password approach where you enter in your username and your password, and then the system sends to your smartphone a code, and then you enter that code in, and it knows that you have that particular smartphone, not some other smartphone. It's just the added security. Install bug patches as soon as you get them. Don't wait. Reduce insider threat possibilities. If someone's being laid off, close their account quickly, all right? Or if you have an employee that doesn't need access to a database, don't give them that access to the database. And then finally, stay informed. Have in your IT department an expert in cybersecurity, and go out and look for the experts like US CERT, which is a Department of Homeland Security website that you can go to find out what the latest bugs are out there. All right. So in conclusion, cybersecurity is a social-technical problem. The problem space is constantly changing, so you have to stay up on it. Attacker sophistication is always evolving, and they are. It's just go to the deep web and watch. The informed workspace is necessary, and then finally, we're all responsible for cybersecurity. Thank you.
Okay, we've all figured out who I am and who I work for. So in my 30 years on the Sheriff's Department, I didn't know that I would end up being in charge of our press office for 5 years, up until about a year ago, and now I work in our North Patrol Division, North County Patrol Division. So during that time there, I was fortunate to lead a group of people that implemented a new website, social media ranging from Facebook and all these other things that we'll talk about in a minute. I come from a family of 6 kids, and all 5 of my brothers and sisters are in marketing full-time. Not in sales, they're all in marketing. Go figure. Also, several other relatives. So it's kind of an odd thing. I'm the oddball, I'm the cop. But at backyard barbecues for 30 years, and I have a finance degree, so I have a business background, a restaurant background. It just kind of gelled, backyard barbecue. They want to hear cop stories. I want to understand more about how people think in marketing and so on. So that's how I landed doing what I was doing, a little unusual. So I really like what Tamara and Michael said, and I'm going to talk about yet another aspect. I certainly agreed with everything they said. Couldn't have said it better myself. I don't know if you could see it, but the people holding up the cell phones, that's one of the classes we teach. Teach a 2-day class regarding social media and law enforcement, lectured on all kinds of stuff related to this, but I've got 10 minutes, so I've got to dial down. 2 days, 10 minutes. So the world really has changed. We've all got a computer in our pockets. I can tell you that from a youth perspective, they're about as dangerous as can be. But I will tell you in terms of change, there's 2 things that cops hate the most. One is change, and the other is the way things are. That is a fact, okay? So we really have to change. We're really slow at change. I know that's a shock to you. It might even be disturbing to hear that or even think about that, but strategic listening is happening with the public and the news media, yes. News media, they're communicating with the public, public's communicating with them. If me and my people aren't communicating with them, am I doing my job? I would say no, because how do we protect? We need to go wherever the public is. We need to be there to help them, help protect them, because there's lots of vulnerable people out there, right? But we need to do it without violating people's rights, too. So let me point out something. Open source information. So you heard Tamara speak about expectation of privacy. If you go on Twitter and you tell the entire world what you had for breakfast this morning, is it okay if I look at that? I don't want to, I'm really not that interested. But if you're 14 years old and you say you're on your way to school to shoot it up, should I be looking for that? Okay. How about at Santa Monica College, not far from here, what was that, about a year and a half ago, where the guy not far off campus went and started shooting things up and lighting things on fire. By all immediate perceptions, it was multiple suspects and all that. So why am I bringing that up right now? As well, I'm hoping, oh yes, laser. So don't point these at helicopters, it's a crime. I just want to tell you that. Okay, so what is this picture of? This is a student who's hunkered down because the campus sent out an alert that says there's an active shooter on campus. They did what they're supposed to do. They hunkered down, shelter in place, locked the doors, and this guy takes a picture of he and his friends hunkered down and posts it on Instagram, because that's what everybody does now. Younger, the more frequent, you know. At any rate, so what's everybody doing in here? Can you even see this? Okay, what's this person doing? Texting. She's talking about it. What are these folks doing? Oh, they're doing the same thing. Can't see this guy. Here's another person doing it. What's she doing? She's depressed because she doesn't have a Jackery or other recharger to charge her cell phone. The battery's dead. So she's bumming. At any rate, what are these people doing? You can't see it here for the sake of time. I can't get into it. These are reporters who noticed this gentleman's posting and are asking him, hey, can you call me and tell what's going on? Okay, now I'm picturing this. Hunkered down, everybody quiet. There's an active shooter outside. Yes, reporter, we're in this room right here. Can you see where that kind of stuff would cause me to think not so good? And if you're a parent of this student, what are you thinking? So at any rate, this is the new normal, yes? The new normal. So I've got people hunkered down, their lives are in danger, students in danger. They're using geotags, so it says specifically what room they're in, right? So we could, as a rescue team, actually find where the people hunkering down. If the bad guys are sophisticated, could they? The reporters could. It took them 3 minutes to acknowledge the first reporter to come online. Should I be monitoring what people are openly sharing for the world to see? Okay? Bad guys can see it. Reporters can see it. Reporters are doing their job. I don't really fault them. I wish they wouldn't say call us if they could just keep doing their thing, you know. At any rate, so it is part of our job to listen, monitor the public today. pointing out something. Maybe you're not aware of this. Maybe you saw some of the news about it. One of the things, as we're just monitoring social media, what are people are saying, we're not focused on individuals. We're looking for criminal activity. We're looking for cries for help. Suicidal people, which we found many and prevented many suicides by doing this. This is open information. Junior here is having a drug party at his home while parents are away. If you'd like to come, be sure it's girls in high heels and short skirts get in free before 10:30 p.m. If you bring, you cannot bring your drugs. We will sell it to you at the site. Nitrous oxide, NOS, which is used to get high, is part of this story. So this is all part of this. Openly shared on social media for the world to see. By the way, do you have any idea how much fun it is to post on somebody like this Facebook page saying, thanks for the invite, see you there. And the sender is Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Confession is good for the soul. I'm confessing that was a lot of fun. And the response back was just like, you can't do this, you can't do this. You know, well, you invited me, you told everybody. So we dealt with this thing, even worked with the legislature because this was a misdemeanor federal crime, but not a crime in the state of California to sell it. It is now, and we shut down, we did a Sheriff's Department and the Federal Food and Drug Administration shipped in every investigator they had in the entire United States, and we did dozens of search warrants and shut down auto parts businesses that they didn't even have a air filter to sell. All they had was nitrous oxide to get your kids high. This resulted in many deaths, overdoses. You know, they heat up a tank and it blows up and killed a guy and wounded a bunch of kids. This is in Los Angeles County, by the way. It's not in a faraway land. This is the life I live. It's kind of interesting, but sad. So our ECOM unit, electronic communications triage unit, just a handful of people, one person on at a time, which is really, really small staff. We found over 1,000 of those teen drug parties. It wasn't one, it wasn't two. In LA County Sheriff's area, I can tell you, by taking the approach we did, which was to go to the party as it's starting and say, hey, party's over. If you have this party, people are going to jail because you have openly advertised that you're selling drugs and providing alcohol to minors. More fun. So we call that fun, you know, at any rate. Then they go online and they post pictures of our patrol cars. They hide behind a tree to do it, and they say really bad names. I have 11,000 Twitter followers. Every name that I've been called, bad name in person, I've been called many, many more online. I cry myself to sleep. You can tell it's really bothering me. At any rate, so rapidly evolving events, including what I mentioned about a teen threatening to do harm at school. One of many incidents is what we happened to see it as soon as it got posted. We stopped the kid before he left the house. He didn't have he had no weapons or anything, but his threat was quite specific. What did we prevent? We prevented almost 1,000 students and thousands of parents from that big nasty word fear. Because ultimately it would have been okay and we'd have got the guy and everything, but we prevented thousands. And how about you? How'd you like to leave right now to go pick up your child at school because some knucklehead decides that they're going to vent? And so, interesting times. Criminal threats, homicides and major crimes. People they won't tell us that they witnessed or heard an officer-involved shooting, but they'll Instagram everybody that they know that they did. Well, we have found many, many auditory witnesses, people who heard the shots fired, which can be very important, having to do with whether it was a legitimate shooting by law enforcement or not. Was it bang, 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 or was it bang, bang, bang? That's two different shootings, right? So, important that we get all facts from all possible persons. I mentioned this, planned protests. We have found hundreds and hundreds of planned protests, right? Which required us to do certain types of well, I should say, they're planning their protest online, but they didn't tell us, okay? The inconvenience to people not involved in it is, okay, you're bringing your wife to the hospital, she's in labor, and you're now caught up in this traffic nightmare that you had no idea were there. Why didn't the cops prevent this? Well, because they planned the whole thing on social media. We didn't know they didn't get a permit. So I can tell you, working with, especially with LAPD, we have found probably about 400 or 500 protests that were planned on social media, I can tell you we did not stop one of them, not a single one. What we did was facilitated people's First Amendment rights without violating your right to free movement, right? So by us knowing about it, we can go and block traffic and do what we have to do. If we have to get to the point where there's warnings and got to shut it down, lots of warnings. But we haven't had to shut them down. We just got there and prevented the damage to traffic and so on neighboring it. So when we share information, one of the things, again, shocking revelation about cops, we don't really share a lot, okay? We don't say that much, and so trying to get cops to be marketing people and share, that's the not so fun part. But let's look at other government entities. FEMA, which is a tremendous provider of what to our local communities in the event of a disaster? There you go. There's not 5,000 people waiting at FEMA going, I'm waiting for that phone call any minute now. LA is going to call. No, they can provide the money, number one, and some coordinating capabilities. FEMA's using Twitter. This is actually an old, I did this like a year ago. They had 250,000 followers then. Are they engaged? Are they engaged? Yeah. So if the people providing the money are engaged and we want the money, I'm just doing the math, at any rate. So they were directing people during Oklahoma about, and especially media, news media really follows Twitter very closely. That's their favorite thing. And they're telling how to get information. Then the media grabs that information and broadcasts it wider, right? So we need to be in that arena. Craig Fugate is the administrator of FEMA. He personally tweets, right? So these are the systems that LA County Sheriff's Department uses, our website, Facebook, Nixle, Twitter. Every patrol station has their own, okay? So we can be geo-specific so people aren't inundated with, you know, if you live in Lakewood and Lancaster, you don't necessarily want to know what each other is doing. I can tell you, community-specific. Unless it involves a celebrity that then everybody just, for some reason, wants to know what they had for breakfast. I don't know. And Alert LA County is like a reverse 911 system, and so that's available for emergency geo-specific targeting, right? Others that we use just to share what we do, and you know, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is hiring right now, right? So in addition to our messaging, we want to make sure that we have visuals of who we are, what we do, other than just the patrol car going by or what you may see online. So we're using YouTube, Pinterest, and Instagram to help put that out, right? But we don't really use that for urgent communications. And by the way, all this communication system I talked about so far, it's very important to have a presence during routine times, because when the crisis hits, you have a viable, credible source. You don't have to be great at it, but you need to have a viable, credible source. We use multiple systems because our goal is to present information the way people want it. You may want Facebook, you may want text or email via Nixle, you may want to go to a website. Same message delivered in all these different means is really serving the public what they want the most. Also is in the event of a crisis, or as you heard before, dedicated denial of service, some kind of attack, and they take down our website. We still have Nixle, Facebook. If they got to do a lot of damage across all these areas to take us completely out of the communication business. And in the time of earthquake, fire, flood, or other emergency, is it important that I be able to tell you and the media what's going on? Yes, it goes beyond just fear. It could be life and death. So we're not fooling around here. So we also use it to update people about what's going on during emergencies. Here's a few examples. Also, things like that do show people, it actually is very effective in letting the public know, hey, we have this multi-agency team where we're all working together to work for you and to help you. It has a calming influence with people, and you can see it on social media where the rhetoric decreases. There's a lot of anxiety, and then we put out something like this, information, and they calm, right? We owe it to the public not just to protect them from a public safety aspect, but to not have unnecessary fear. Here's an example how we can share information about potentially prevent a missing child or a kidnapping or something like that, and we use our systems to share information like that. I'll give you a chance to read it. I think it's a pretty good guess everybody in here can read, so I'm good with that. Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out is I was having a conversation with a younger deputy, and I said, what do you make of all this, that, you know, how much younger people especially share? Because us guys that are over 40, okay, over 50, so that we don't get it. Why all this stuff? I I don't really need to know what you had for breakfast. I'm not that interested in that. And here's what this younger deputy told me. I thought it was brilliant. He didn't know he was brilliant. I told him that. His head's at any rate. So he said, look, your generation, and I said, what? Anyways, he said, okay, your generation told my generation that everything we do is fabulous and spectacular. And in fact, when I went to my kids' high school graduations, they've graduated college by now, but went to my high school graduations, every kid in every club that they were in, I sat through a 3.5-hour presentation where 162 kids all got a certificate. That's what our generation did. So everything you do, kid, is really exciting, important. I want to know everything you're doing. And the helicopter parent, all this kind of stuff, right? And then, because that wasn't enough. And then we said, here's how you can tell everybody, because everything that you're doing is so fabulous, right? So we bred this situation, and look at the youngest person in the room, possibly. There's another young person here. They're like, yeah. So, and then we gave them this tool so they could share everything, right? So I thought that was very accurate, right? So stop blaming them, look within. So, okay, these are hashtags, very popular in LA County and some in the US even. These are used when we have quakes. You know, we actually have quakes, not uncommonly. They're not real big. You know, it's funny because when I talk to people that don't live in an earthquake area and say, that was just a 3.8. My gosh, what does that mean? So at any rate, so these are hashtags. I don't have time. If you don't know what a hashtag is, that's part 2. So okay, so it's really important that we adapt and engage before the crisis. Agreed? Agreed? So I ask you to ask yourself, ask what's going on in your municipality is, so you're doing what? And are you personally engaged? And if you're not personally engaged, have somebody work for you who is, so that you can make it happen. You also don't handle everything at your office either. You have people that are experts, but you got to empower them too. And they need training. To digress for a minute regarding cyber and cyber crimes, I divide them into 3 categories. It's actually a policy within the Sheriff's Department. There's some things published regarding this. Cyber crime. Example of a cyber crime. Somebody uses online systems to commit a theft, right? They get into your bank account or something like that, commit a theft, okay? A cyber-related crime. A dating site, you know, guy and a girl talk on a dating site, they get to meet, there's nothing wrong there, they agree to meet, and some kind of assault occurs, right? So one was necessary, or at least in that case, was necessary for the actual crime to occur. And a cyber-related incident, of which there are massive numbers, would be, as we heard talked earlier about like cyberbullying. You know, at what point does teasing evolve into cyberbullying? And that's another point when people ask, hey, you know, do you think things are tougher for kids than they were when you were a kid? Yeah, because, you know, when I was a kid, you could get bullied at school, you could get bullied in the neighborhood, but you typically, unless things are terrible at home, you could go home and get a break. There's no break now for kids because they have these, right? There's training that is provided within the US regarding social media, cyber-related. I didn't want to duplicate what was said earlier about cyber crimes. If we have time, I can answer any questions you have. But I do want to tell you, International Association of Chiefs of Police, Center for Social Media, that website actually has things, police or not, that can be very helpful to you. The Law Enforcement Social Media Conference is another example. And the Social Media Law Enforcement Conference, again, there's lots of crossover. I never sent any of my people to non-government social media training because the business community operates very differently. And what's okay with them is not okay with us. They're violating those policies that you heard about and opening windows we can't be opening. The government social media, this is relatively new. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Espanol. Government. It's not governmental, it's governmentsocialmedia.com. I saw that's new, and that's focused on government and social media needs. So I worked with Post. I was invited. It was nice. I worked with Post, and there is a California Peace Officer Standards and Training video, 2-hour training video, which absolutely have application within all branches of government. Just pardon the fact that we're all wearing uniforms and being cops, you know. But there's a lot of crossover having to do with how to protect yourself, so therefore you can protect the community. So with that, again, I'll emphasize that what we're operating under is the same Constitution everybody else is. When you heard me talk about what we're monitoring and so on, it's all open source when I talk about that communication systems. And again, I didn't want to duplicate the other speakers. So I will, one last comment I wanted to make had to do with 1984. You know, I read that book when I was in high school, and it's Big Brother and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about you, but I've kind of come to the conclusion Big Brother is everybody in this room and everybody in the community now, everybody's monitoring each other and posting everything I do and you do on the internet. So, thank you for your attention.
So I'm Glenn Haddox. I'm from Edison. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity, or you might hear in the industry, CISOs. You know, I'm the guy that gets fired as soon as there's a breach. Right. So, but you get to dig your own grave. So it takes about a week to get fired. So, you know, it's one thing you really look forward to in the job. So I've been in cyber about 30 years. Way before they called it cyber, I came from the intelligence community. So I'm different than a lot of the IT folks you see today. I've never worked in IT till recently. So it's a different path, because before we had the gentleman's agreement that broke down between nations in the early 90s, nations were attacking each other's military systems and government systems. That's where I learned the game. So, but it's hard to believe, only being 29, I could experience that. So one of the big things is today, as a utility who's regulated by, nope, that ain't it. who's regulated by the community, and also being a business, as we're huge. We're about 60,000 square miles. So you can imagine how much wire. I have over 4 million nodes. That's a lot of places for people to come in and help me. Last year we got attacked over 3 million times, and about 1.7 million of those were from nation states. So you can imagine there are people who want you to live in the dark. It's amazing. What's the threats to you guys being in the dark? Well, believe it or not, we suffer just like everybody else does, that there are people who want to steal our stuff. Because believe it or not, we have lots of records on you guys, right? Where you pay your bills, a lot of personal data. But compared to a bank, not very much there. We carry about 40 million records. And when you hear of banks getting breached in billions of records, it's a threat, but it's not our number one threat. Our number one threat is people want to break our stuff, right? These kind of people. And what they actually want to do is they want to create social unrest by causing the grid to collapse. So I know there's some great TV out there. There's always a doom and gloom reporter. But as you guys may not realize, there's about 3,000 electrical companies. About 22 of us do about 80% of the grid, and the rest are municipalities and very small. But the one nice thing about it is we don't all do it the same. So you may hear lots of things about they're going to take the grid down. Not likely. They may blacken out areas, but to take down the whole US grid and keep it down, not likely. Makes great TV, not great science. One of the things that they will do, that they're spending a lot of time, and some of these, this isn't the only list. There's a whole bunch of lists. And those of you in public policy need to understand these guys spend billions of dollars every year on building cyber weapons, and it is a military function in most of these governments. So you're not talking about people who are not formidable attackers. They're going to do things similar to Stuxnet. They're not going to do a denial of service, because as soon as you turn the stimulation off, the system comes back up. They're going to do things to destroy systems, right? So they're going to do physical harm, and they're going to try to destroy long lead items, right? Because some of the things in a grid, believe it or not, take years to build. If I can blow those components up, I can keep people in the dark a long time. We have yet to have a customer call up and say, I appreciated you leaving me in the dark. So we're figuring they're going to take that poorly. So one of the things that we do, mostly with our staff, but we also do it out in the community, is cyber's one of those things you go to teach and it's like watching paint dry, right? I mean, their eyes roll back and you can put somebody on no-dose asleep. And I'm kind of dating myself because I don't even know if no-dose is around anymore. But what we did was we've changed our training processes to teaching cyber at home. Just about all our employees have children. They're all worried about their kids and the internet. The Internet of Things scare most of our generation to death, right? Because our kids have no sense of how dangerous the social media world can truly be, right? And after following the commander, I'm sure he probably concerns you a little bit. Banking at home, you know, how do I keep my teenage kids safe on, you know, Facebook and all these different things. Then one of the other things is we get into fixing the knowledge base. We have a technical series of things we do. Did you know? That's really for engineers. How do you break into stuff? Did you know you can go onto YouTube and watch an 11-year-old hack into somebody's network into their house? Break into your Facebook. There's tons of training material. Most people say, oh, no, that's not really there. And the data is accurate. You really could follow those instructions and break into most people's networks. Did you know most equipment, they never change the default password? You can go on the internet and get the default password to any system you buy. Up till recently, some companies are now changing. So if you run in a municipality and you don't require people to change the passwords, why bother? The bad guys are going to look up the default passwords, and most likely you think you got a good password program. The default is just as bad as 1, 2, 3, 4. So one of the things that we always look for is preparedness. Just like the commander was talking about and everything else, is you've got to be prepared. So it's not if we get attacked. Like I said, we got attacked 3 million times. What are we going to do if they actually break through and damage the internet? And we have two internets. There's the internet that runs the grid, which is not the same internet that you tweet on. So don't let anybody tell you the grid is run on the internet. It looks a lot like the internet. It's a separate system. But we do lots of annual training. We train with the federal government and we train with local governments. We train with the FBI. Because remember, to try to damage the US grid is a crime. We handle it as a crime. So we work with law enforcement all the time. Also in California, so being a utility, we're under federal regulation, we're under state regulation. So who wins? Well, that's sometimes a debate. We do realize, we work very closely with the state, that the National Guard is going to have a big purpose if there's a cyber attack. Didn't know if you guys knew that. They're spending tons of money with the National Guard. They are very credible. In fact, we're going to do another major exercise with them in the fall. The Speaker's office is trying to put together a thing for data sharing among the large businesses with the state. Because one of the problems that we have as kind of a society, if we get hurt, mum's the word. The herder tells everybody they know everything about your systems. We have to change that culture. We have to get better at sharing data, and we have to come up with paths to effectively share data. And we have to share experiences. You can imagine with a network as large as ours, it's very complex. If we get hurt and then ask somebody to come help us, the learning curve will kill us. So we do lots of these exercises to help, like the National Guard, to know what their role is to come in to assist us. When we work with the municipalities, what they can do to help us. One of the things that we also do is, this is some of our friends and family. We're a major player with all of these folks up here, but one of the things that's really big about it, every one of them are being attacked some way, somehow. Information it can be difficult to digest. Because if you ask for everything, God help you. Because if I dumped all my attacks on you, you probably couldn't process it. So one of the things that we do is with the FBI, they have a neighborhood watch program where between us and the port of LA, we get attacked between the two of us about 5 million times a year. They take all our attack data and they have some analysts that work on the data, and then they reprocess that out to businesses to help them protect themselves. Because everybody cuts their teeth on us. We see just about everything, and both of us have very sophisticated systems to trap the data so advanced analysis can be done on it. Those partnerships are things that I think need to grow. One of the things that was in the President's executive order was to set up more data sharing mechanisms. You know, a lot of people get caught up on the naming, the process, but the whole ideal is create friends and families of cyber sharing. One of the big problems we end up with that is, from my law folks, privacy. You know, when you share stuff, somebody has another vote on it. For the most part, we're doing signatures and countries of origin, but it is a large issue that all of you will have to deal with, and if you think it's bad now, wait 5 years. Because one of the things we are seeing is if you looked at China, it took China about 10 years to get really good. If you look at Iraq and Iran and some of the Middle Eastern countries that are learning the game, they're learning about 2.5 times faster because there's so much material out there to learn from, lessons learned, they're becoming far more dangerous much faster. So it is going to be an ongoing problem at least for the next 10 to 20 years. And with that, I'm done. Hopefully we're back on time.
Thank you.